Our first story, a senior Ukrainian official says President Viktor Yanukovych could call early elections if no other way is found to end the current political crisis. Yuri Miroshnichenko, who's the president's representative in parliament, says Yanukovych has told lawmakers from his region's party that calling early elections is a possibility. This comes as Ukraine's opposition lawmakers have presented their demands to the government in a parliamentary session on Tuesday. They've called for the release of jailed protesters and the slashing of the president's powers. Thousands of protesters still remain camped out on Kiev's Independence Square. The anti-government protests were triggered when Kiev walked away from a major deal with the EU in favour of closer ties with Russia. Dmitry Babich with the Voice of Russia radio station is with us now live from Moscow. Let's get his thoughts on this. Mr. Babich, President Yanukovych calling early elections, it looks like that has become a real possibility. Do you think, however, that it's going to help resolve the political crisis?
Well, it is still a possibility because if he indeed agrees to that, that would mean a major concession basically to the people whom I would not call protesters. They're just thugs, because people who throw Molotov cocktails at police, who occupy government buildings, these are not protesters, these are criminals, and in a country like the United Kingdom or France, they would be in jail for many years. In Ukraine, however, the state is very weak, and it looks like President Yanukovych may make this concession, call early elections. I think it's up to him to decide, because he was elected legitimately in 2010. No one disputed the election, including the Western powers. So what's going on looks like a coup d'etat brought about by the West and an aggressive nationalist minority in the west of Ukraine.
Well, let's look at what the opposition lawmakers have been asking the parliament in their session with lawmakers there. They are calling for what could be described as constitutional reforms, the limiting of the powers of the president. Even if this call for early elections is made, do you think there would be a lot of the protesters who'd be saying, well, we don't want the elections to be held under Yanukovych, that we're afraid of fraud taking place, and we would rather have the reforms first before there can be a new election?
Well, Ukraine already had several legitimate presidential elections which were not disputed by Western powers. This was the election in 2005, then the second one in 2010. So I don't see why the next one should, for some reason, be worse than the previous ones. So I think that the opposition is pushing for early elections because they hope that their candidate, it could be, for example, Vitaly Klitschko, that this person would beat Yanukovych and become the next president. In case their candidate loses, they would like to introduce this old constitution which gives special powers to the government and to the parliament. And they hope to dominate the parliament. That's their expectation. So their attitude is very simple. By hook or by crook, by all means, they want to come to full power in Ukraine.
Well, don't you think then,
the opinion of the majority?
Mr. Babich, just quickly, don't you think then it would be a better idea for Yanukovych, before calling for early elections, to meet the demands like the release of jailed protesters or the slashing of presidential powers?
The slashing of presidential powers, it's not such a simple procedure. It's a change to the constitution. Changes to the constitution in any country require certain procedures and certain majorities in the parliament. As for releasing the so-called protesters, I mean, did you see the pictures? They turned half of Kiev into a wasteland. They injured 200 policemen. I don't call these persons protesters. I think they are thugs.
Mr. Dmitry Babich with the Voice of Russia radio station with us there live. Thank you very much, Mr. Babich.